Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens, exploring life's what ifs. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Sharan Kaur Varaitch, founder of Build and Conquer Financial Literacy. Sharan, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Oh, it's fabulous to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited for this conversation. You're doing some great work. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead to your passion for increasing financial literacy?
So, my story is a little bit different. It's not the traditional accountant story that I often hear in the financial literacy space. Mine's from a lived experience. I grew up just outside of Birmingham, and one may say a sort of a disadvantaged area. I saw my parents sort of in and out of jobs, working to the nth hour. And it was at that point when I was sort of in primary school, I started thinking about their relationship with money and actually they're working so many hours, but we are not any more financially well off. You know, we're still living sort of paycheck to paycheck. And that really kind of sent me on my quest to discover a different way. I started supporting my parents from the age of 15 in terms of just financially. And that really kind of put me on stead to understand more about money, how money works, and how I can make it work better for me, really.
Well, that's fantastic. But that must have been really hard at 15 to do that. I mean, did you feel like you even knew sort of what you were doing at that point, or was it just sort of a struggle also to learn at the same time you had to do it?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to my experience at school, financial literacy is somewhat spoken about in schools now. We have more of an awareness about financial literacy. But back then, there was I remember not receiving an ounce worth of financial literacy. And I really started doing my own research, and I became a really good saver. I was obviously working from the age of 15 and I began saving, my last penny to just make sure that I was a bit more financially comfortable. And actually I really started questioning my needs and wants. So when I was, you're in this kind of place in your life where you're thinking about, I want to purchase so many things, I want to keep up with my friends, whether it be trainers, dresses, makeup. But it was at that point I thought, actually, what is it doing for me and actually my bottom line? What's it doing for my bank account? And I really started researching about investing, and to be honest, it changed my life. So most of the research I did, I did kind of off my own back, really.
That's fantastic. I think what you said is about thinking about what money is doing for you. Was there any one book or video or person who really resonated with you that sparked your interest?
I actually, so I actually ended up meeting quite a famous athlete. He's a boxer. He's a boxer in the UK. His name is David Hayes, and he was the one that I remember. I don't know how we got into the conversation about money, and I remember I met him at sort of the tender age of sort of 19, and he was the one that actually said, how you really want to make money work for you is and how you really, yeah, that at that point I did, as a very normal 17, 18, 19 year old, I was thinking about, I want to be rich. I want some
Hmm.
money in my pocket so I can go out with my friends and not have to worry about things. And but in the back of my mind, I was always thinking about the financial stability of our household and my parents. They mean a lot to me. So it was always an internal struggle, but I remember him imparting some wisdom and saying, start investing early. Time is your most valuable asset, and that's always stuck with me.
I love that. Time is your most valuable asset. And especially if you were able to start um, doing and saving and investing at that early age. I mean, the magic of compound interest is fantastic with that kind of runway. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your work. What is Build and Conquer Financial Literacy?
So, Build and Conquer Financial Literacy has been on a little bit of a journey. Um, I essentially my background is human resources, organizational development, learning and development, puts me in very good stead to create programs, deliver workshops as an example, deliver talks on financial literacy. But it wasn't until my most recent role that I was working in the financial services where I was coming across so many young people who just weren't feeling very confident with their money, actually almost scared about finances, and had quite a negative view on their future. And it wasn't until there was uh, a young boy who said, "Well, I lent my credit card to my friend. Why am I responsible in paying it back?" And that just struck a chord within me. And I remember saying to my colleague, wouldn't it be great if we ended up going into schools, but we taught them everything about finance, from financial stability all the way through to wealth creation, even ethics, and how once you've nailed financial stability and you have your wealth creation that's ticking away, actually how we can use money for good. So I really started off delivering workshops through Build and Conquer. And it wasn't until a little bit of a sort of a penny drop moment where a large organisation and a school and an alternative provision based organisation reached out and they said, "Yeah, your programs are great. Love the topics that you cover. Can you train our teachers?" I mean, and I just stood and I thought, how would we do that? Because obviously we have a national curriculum here in the UK, and there is a quote, isn't there, by Rumi, as you something like as you walk the path, the path shows, and that's exactly what happened. We ended up creating a program. It's been in development for the past couple of years, but we developed a program specifically for teachers where they could essentially pick up our program and lift it and shift it into their slot it into their current curriculum, alongside providing training to deliver that particular scheme of work. So I remember reaching out in the very early stages. I reached out to a multi-academy trust. I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning. They're called Three Spires Trust, and they're based here in Stafford. And that call was just life changing. They talked to me about their new curriculum that they wanted to introduce. They had similar frustrations about us as adults not being in a position where we're equipping young people to acquire the skills they need to thrive in the future. And it was almost like our values just collided, I remember we're having a very long conversation about what we could do. They introduced me to their curriculum called Next Gen, the Next Gen curriculum, which includes 4 strands. So it's oracy, financial literacy, work experience, and AI. So this was like music to my ears, a school that thinks financial literacy should be part of their curriculum. And collectively and through collaboration, we've created this program, which is doing really well. We currently operate in Yorkshire, London, across parts of Warwickshire, as well as the Black Country and Wolverhampton and Dudley. So it's going really well. What it consists of is an all through curriculum. So we start from early years all the way up to post 16, and it's a buildable curriculum. And it's progressive, just like our national curriculum.
Well, that's fantastic. So, one of the things we were talking about pre-show was about the value of bringing teachers into the conversation and having teachers help build the curriculum. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that is such an important factor?
It's probably the most important factor. Being in this space, I've never come across an adult, whether it be a teacher, a parent, a friend, an entrepreneur, a business owner, who has said that we don't need financial literacy across our curriculum. It's the thing that we think about every day for our entire lives. At one point during the day, we will think about our money. And so most of us, if not all of us, are really passionate about equipping the next generation with the skills that we never had. We think back to our own financial education. Mine was non-existent. And what I was really passionate about is that we not just provide a slice of the cake, but the entire cake, the full rounded picture. And we've categorized that as financial stability, wealth creation, and ethics. And that just simply isn't possible as an organization to do that in silo. It has to be fit for purpose. It has to be easy for teachers. Teachers across the world grapple with high workloads, a lack of work-life balance. And so what I was really passionate about was that this isn't going to add to their workload, and it has to be really easy to teach, free of the jargon. And that's where the training comes into place. I mean, we've had responses for our training from the teachers that we work with. 100% of our teachers have stated that that they have a higher confidence in delivering the scheme of work that we provide. So that's great. But also I see light bulb moments, and they're like, oh, I wonder how that could work for me, or can I have a conversation about my teacher pension, or how can you help me understand my investments, or I've got this much equity in my home, what could I do with it? And so I guess through this program, my real aim is to boost the financial capability of teachers, because when teachers get it, the students will get it, and that's good CPD.
I love that, because that's something that I know I saw in our local school district, is that the teachers didn't feel comfortable with money. So it was hard for them to teach it. They might feel ashamed of their own money, or just not comfortable. And it makes it hard for them to implement when they're working through their own feelings about money. So that's fantastic that you're really bringing teachers into the mix. And I think that's something we need to think about through the whole financial literacy movement, is when we're using an intermediary, is that the intermediary needs to also feel comfortable with money. So let's talk about that for a minute. Why is money often a taboo subject?
I mean, that question, only 1% of teachers receive financial literacy training. So if we're looking at teachers as an example, just as an example, that's multi-generational, that feeling of money being a taboo subject. I think that that's multi-strand. So I think sometimes when we talk about money, we can make people feel uncomfortable because it's like the ostrich effect, isn't it? When we put our head under the sand, and maybe things pile up, such as debt, or maybe that you have two friends and one person's really confident with money versus the other. It can be a little bit of a sticky subject sometimes. Should you receive a salary increase? You've got a new job and your salary's increased, or you're buying a new home, as an example, or you're investing. But I think the crux of it is, we as society just have not created the environment to talk about money openly, so it's compounded over time. And I think, I think some of it, we don't know what we don't know. And my advice to anybody who does feel uncomfortable with money is it's absolutely fine, because we were never taught it. And especially if your parents don't talk about it, and maybe you don't talk about it with your friends or your partner, where are you to get that knowledge from? And part of that is just bringing some awareness to that you feel uncomfortable, and being okay with that.
I love that. And I think that is so important. It's oftentimes missed with financial literacy and money is that we expect people to know certain things, but we have to back up and realize that they don't know. They don't know what questions to ask. And so it's really hard to ask good questions when you don't even know what questions to ask. So it's, yeah, is getting to that core is important, and bringing it to a place where we can actually feel comfortable talking about it and not shame. That's something that I've seen a lot is people feel ashamed because they feel like, wait, I should know this. Everybody else knows what an insurance premium is, for example, or what interest is. And it's like, no, they don't. And that's something I've heard from people all around the world is that, these are the common issues that people share. And then we have to back up and get to that foundational piece. So, one of the things that you talk about and you just touched on is generational poverty. How can financial literacy break generational poverty, or at least help to break it?
I think certainly talking about, if you're a parent, talking about money around the table and being mindful about how we talk about money. Um, I always use this analogy. It's going to expand you or it's going to contract you. Who you surround yourself with, they're going to expand you or they're going to contract you. And it's about being aware of how you feel when you're hearing about money, as an example, as a child, as an example. I think if you're a parent, being mindful about being mindful of how you talk about money, talking about money in a positive way. Um, um, I think also strengthening household resilience. You know, about 50, over 50% of just over 50% of adults here across the UK have an emergency fund. That's still not a lot. And bringing some awareness to household bills and what's going out, what's coming in, just sitting down and taking the time to focus on your finances, cutting out subscriptions that you no longer pay for, understanding where you can save a little bit of money. Maybe, if your salary has increased through a new job promotion, not rushing out and buying a car on finance, so that actually you see the extra money coming into your bank account and doing something with it. I think building some sort of household resilience, where it's through savings or investments, is absolutely key. And then, of course, education. The buck stops with us. We have to do something. In my view, we have to do something radical, and it's for the greater good. We have to, and we can. We've shown that it's possible, that we can talk about finance, align it to the national curriculum, touching upon skills such as oracy, critical thinking, entrepreneurship, tying our curriculum together through the conversations we have about modern work experience. Okay, let's bring finance into the conversation too. They go hand in hand. I think that's a significant key as well. Actually, just talking about that as an interesting study. There's a number of studies across the world, and some of which uh, um, most recently have been studies have been undertaken in Africa. And what it showed was that when young people are exposed to financial literacy as well as work experience, they're more likely to aim higher in their job role. They're more likely to apply for a job role that's much higher than that kind of what they would originally apply for, earn more money, and actually stay in the job longer than they would be if they didn't receive financial literacy. As you probably know, Tony, we have a record number of NEETs across our country, and costs the economy a lot of money. There's a number of benefits for introducing financial literacy, but the crux of it's education is the key. I think with that we can tackle a lot of issues, including money taboo.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. Is that we have to incorporated into everything. Well, not incorporated into everything, but understand that it's all related, as you point out, is to, our jobs, our lives, our stress levels, everything else. But money powers what we're able to do. So, to go a little bit deeper on that, how can financial literacy lead us to a more equitable and prosperous society? How does it help society as a whole?
We were talking a little bit about this before our call, weren't we? That we can teach the tools, the knowledge, to people of how to budget and how to save and how much money to put aside for investments. But I think the most um, the most beneficial aspect of introducing financial literacy when talking about money, and sharing this information, is just the effect that it has on your mindset, the trust that it builds within. Just using that example earlier, um, you know, if young people, if that study showed that young people felt more confident to aim higher and apply for those job roles, that they would have originally kind of cast themselves out of that arena to begin with. If financial literacy can do that, and that compounds over time, we aren't going to see one of our the colleges that we work with actually mentioned this. We're not going to see the effects. We need to start now, but we're not going to actually see the true effect of this for 10 to 20 years time. We must start now, and we must leave no child behind. It should be no child should ever miss out from receiving financial literacy. But could you imagine the effects that would have on society in 20 years time? People would be earning more, people would be investing, people would know how to create emergency funds and have those savings backed up. It's yeah, I think it starts with bringing the conversation to the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part, is just starting to have the conversations and normalizing that it's okay to talk about money, because people oftentimes don't talk about money. And I think you said one thing in there that is so critical, is that financial literacy builds confidence. And I think that's something that we need to focus on, is what financial literacy can do, rather than getting too far into the weeds. Of course, it's important to learn how to invest, but most people really don't care about learning stocks versus bonds and how to create a portfolio. They care about being comfortable, or they care about making sure their family is taken care of. So, but that comes with confidence, is people feeling confident that they can take control of their money, and that they're not going to be ashamed, as we talked about earlier.
I think in our experience as well, that changes with time at different milestones. So of course, young people aren't thinking about retirement. They're not thinking about even getting on buying a property if that's suitable for them. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head when you said, most people, um, some people may not be interested in creating a diversified portfolio. And what I don't really want to kind of share is that there isn't a right or a wrong. Managing money and how you feel about money really comes down to what you truly want. I think we should really start there with an individual. Is what do you really want to achieve? Is it more financial freedom? Is it taking more holidays? Is it more time with loved ones? Because there isn't really kind of like a blanket approach of this is what it looks like to manage money well. And you're absolutely right. The fundamental key point within this conversation is financial well-being. That comes first. And we were talking about how even when we start talking about money and learning about financial education and how that trickles into other areas of life, you start to, as a youngster, say, level up, in those different areas of your life. You build trust and confidence with yourself.
Yeah, I love that. So to wrap up, let's get into what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions that I ask all my guests. They're more rapid fire in nature. The first one is, what's one money myth you're trying to break?
That money is hard to come by. That's what I'd really like. Money and prosperity is everyone's birthright.
I
So
love
that's
that. I'm just making a note. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's something, and I've heard this from a lot of guests, is that a lot of people don't feel like money is for them or that they deserve it or whatever, or they're not rich people, so they can't do it. So I love that. That is a great myth to break. So let's get out the time machine for a minute, Sharon. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money, what would you tell your younger self?
to have patience. To have patience, it takes time. We always want to get there tomorrow. I mean, we know, you and I, Tony, we know how compound interest works, the compound effect, the eighth wonder of the world. It takes time. Time is always going to be your most valuable asset, and to have patience whilst that builds, and to be proud that I took that first step. So if I was going back in time and I was telling myself, my younger self, is that I would be proud that I learned to opened a cash ISA at the tender age of 18 and started, depositing, set up a standing order and started putting some money into my in my savings account. But yeah, the main thing I would say is to have patience.
I love that I think of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they talk about their favorite holding period is forever.
Yeah,
Um, for holding on to something. And
it's
while you don't always do that, is that goes to your point.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know he's a wise man, isn't he, Warren Buffett? But yeah, it all takes time. We always want to get there, and it's more about the journey than it is about the destination.
Ooh, I love that. It's more about the journey than the destination because I think that it is something that people miss out on when they talk about money is they think that it is a destination. And, I don't know if they have the financial independence, retire early movement in the UK, the FIRE movement, where people just work so hard, to retire in 10 years or 15 years, but they don't live their life during that time. They give up everything else. And a lot of them have been miserable at the end of it. And so I
Yeah.
think that goes to your point is that you have to enjoy the journey as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Balance is key, and it's great to some of the one of the best pieces of advice I received from a property investor was actually work backwards. So
Hmm.
working backwards, when do you want to retire? How much do you need to put aside? But also build in some buffer points where you stop and smell the roses. Life isn't all about working to acquire money. And it's more about having discipline and the discipline to maintain consistency. It's the consistency part that often catches people out, and having patience. So if you combine all of that, into a big pot, that's a great recipe for leading a financially balanced life, or balance in general.
Yeah, I love that. So, last question, Sharon, is what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about money?
This is going to be so my my answer is going to be a little bit more, because the tip that I want to share with people, it's going to look very different. When I go into a workshop, when I'm delivering talks on financial literacy, it's it's never often a blanket approach. It's get clear on what you want, because what you want will look very different to your neighbours, to your family, partner. So my tip would be to bring some awareness of what you want in life, and believe it is achievable by creating a plan. But sometimes just asking people, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to retire early, or do you want to start a diversified portfolio? Do you want to get into investments, or do you not? Is that not your thing because of your own risk tolerance? That's always going to look so different from one person to another. So my tip would be sit down with a pen and paper, and at the top, what I'd really like to achieve financially is, and write what your desired outcome would be. What does your life look like? Do you want to have more time to spend with your family or your children? Do you want something that fills your heart with passion, and you're thinking about a little bit of a side hustle, but you know that in order to kind of give it all, in order to do that, you maybe have to step away from your day job. So then what that looks like is maybe, 12 months of living costs for 2 years, and putting a plan in to save that amount of money so that you can work on your side hustle, your passion project. I think often we don't give ourselves the time to really think about what do we want, and are we heading in the correct direction?
I love that. And I think that is so important. And you alluded to it earlier, is that our goals are all different. For some people, buying a house is important. For other people, it's not. And there's not a right or wrong. Sometimes people pencil out the numbers and they go, well, you're going to be a little bit better if you rent, or you're going to be a little bit better if you buy a house. But that's not really the question, is, as you point out, is like, what is your goals and how do you see your life achieving? Because for some people, they don't want to be tied down by owning a home because they may like moving every couple of years. So it's all a balancing act for what you want to achieve. So I think that's a wonderful note to close on. So Sharon, where can people learn more about you and build and conquer financial literacy?
So you can reach out to us at buildandconquer.com. And we're very active on LinkedIn. I'm very active too. So there is the organisation's company page, as well as my own, Sharan Kaur Varaitch. And then alternatively is through our website.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching and listening, if you have access to the show notes, there will be all these links in the show notes so you can go there. Sharon, thanks for sharing your journey today on the Get Ready Before Life Happens podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Tony. I'm such a big fan, and yeah, honestly, when you reached out, it's been an absolute honour to have this discussion with you. I'm a really big fan of the show, so yeah, keep up the great work, and hopefully you'll have me back at a later date. I'd love to come back.
Oh, I'd love that. And I am so honored. Well, I appreciate your words and everything. I just thank you so much. It means a lot. But it's guests like you who make the show happen. So I really appreciate your time and insights. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money and maybe build your own money confidence, be sure to subscribe and to share with a friend. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement and get access to my newsletter and a whole bunch of free tools and resources. Until next time, because life happens, get ready.